Okay, so we're starting the class. This is week 13 of CO 300. We're looking at questions about the PowerPoint presentations. And Jenny, you had a question. Can you re-say your question?
Um,
Thanks.
I
How to
really forgot what I asked.
how to integrate audio into the
Oh
presentation.
yeah,
If you're
how
gonna,
how to do that? How to if you want it to be like in one like document, or if you want it to be like two separate things that we send in, or what the deal with that is.
thanks. Bronwyn?
You can do in PowerPoint, there's a button at the top if you have the app downloaded to your computer, which I think we all get it free with our school dues or whatever. And you can just record each slide as you go.
So you can import audio into each slide so that it just automatically plays within the slide. So then the only thing you're uploading is a PowerPoint file.
What if I'm doing Google Drive?
Google Slides,
Yeah.
they also have that option on Google Slides.
Okay.
So you can embed audio in the Google slide, or you can use Screencast-O-Matic, which is free software that just allows you to record with a webcam what your presentation is on your screen. So then you would just start the Google slide presentation and then record it, and then you'll get a movie file. And you can do that with Zoom too. So you don't need to do Screencast-O-Matic. You can just basically play your screen or record your screen with you talking, and then it'll just go through. And that's what I'm going to do today. Show you the example that I have. I have a presentation hosted on YouTube.
Okay.
I don't think it's ideal to put two files. So giving a PowerPoint presentation and an audio file, you can also do that. Like that does work. That's just a little harder for your audience because then they're opening up two things and they have to coordinate them. So that can work, but it's a little harder to view that way.
I have a question. Maybe you're going to get to this about like the audience exigence and constraints. Do we have to like basically say like, this is my audience, this is my exigence, these are my constraints, or can that be like implied?
It's great. No, you do not have to say, my audience for this presentation is you who are watching this presentation. It should just be obvious by saying, I'm hoping, like you can say, I hope, in the example I use, I hope that teachers think about integrating ePortfolios into their classes. Or I want young biology students to think. Or, so you don't need to say the exigence for my presentation is the fact that there's too much plastic in the ocean. You can just say, there's a lot of plastic in the ocean, and that's bad. And what I hope is that if you use single-use plastic, you consider not using single-use plastic. Or, so it should just kind of be implied. It should be obvious. It's not to say you can say, this is my audience, this is my exigence, and these are the constraints. But in real life, you would never do that. So it should be implied more than just stated. That being said, if you've already made your PowerPoint and you said, this is the exigence, this is the audience, these are the constraints, that's also okay, because it will allow us to give you feedback on like, hey, you should think about making your exigence a little more like this. Or your audience is still pretty broad. How could you make it more specific? Or it doesn't really look like you've considered the audience constraints of this. Great question. Other questions? This class is going so well because you have questions, or at least it seems like it's going well to me. Julie.
How do you show that you're tailoring to a specific audience without explicitly saying that that's your audience?
I think your most recent blog post is a really good example. It's just, I think it's something that you recognize or not. Like if you have a whole bunch of scientific data that's really hard to follow, I'm going to guess that you're speaking to people that know about the scientific data that's hard to follow. I had someone give a geology presentation in a previous semester that was really geology term heavy. And everyone at the end of the class, when they saw the presentation, they were like, wow, I feel like I know what it's like to be a geologist. And I know that wasn't for me. So it was kind of obvious that they were using that language. Or where you get in trouble is where it seems like you don't know who you're talking to. So if half of the presentation was like super geology term heavy, and then the other half was like to a different audience, and then you had these other slides that were to another audience altogether, so it's not unified, then I'm like, I don't know if you really thought about the constraints of your audience. Your most recent post, Julian, I just looked at was like, it was really nice multimodal elements. There was no complex scientific jargon in it. It was super easy to read. All of those things tell me you're speaking to all of us. Like, you're speaking to your class that doesn't care about the psychological research of altruism, but they do want to be happy, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of what I'm going to go for with the presentation too. So thanks.
Yep. And then, yeah, I think that it'll show in what you do. Likewise, with all writing, it shows up. I mean, it kind of, that gets revealed in what you do. Other questions?
I have a question about reading notes
Great.
and if we're going to have any after break.
No.
Solid.
Yep,
Thanks.
we're done. The only thing we're doing in the rest of the class is your major projects. So you just have an essay and a portfolio, and that's it after the PowerPoint. And we're going to shift. A lot of the Zoom sessions are going to be more in a format of us helping. There's going to be opportunities for you to work on your projects in Zoom in groups towards the end of the semester. So I want to use our Zoom classes to make progress. And we're going to do a little bit of that right now. In terms of your multimodal PowerPoint, let's actually just look at the rubric. And then I want to see if where I feel like we can help out the most. So under we go to the course and the modules, and we're in module 13. Oh my God, can you believe it? And the final PowerPoint. There's this broad goals that you basically articulate a specific exigence, that you identify an audience, you persuade that audience, and you consider the constraints of that. There's two parts of this. One is the persuasiveness of your argument. And two is the effectiveness of your multimodal presentation. There's 130 points possible. And I should say, you know, not your multimodal presentation is your text elements, your visual elements, and your speech elements, and then how well they integrate together. It's worth 130 points. Half of it is your argument persuasiveness. Half of it is your multimodal effectiveness. And then the other points that are hopefully designed to be able for you to boost your score is 3 peer reviews. So you're gonna look at 3 other people's work and give them feedback on their work as they're moving forward, and then your own self-assessment of it. So this is it's due on Wednesday. Then the way this is set up is that once it's due, it's going to roll over, and then you'll have access to peer reviews since it's not a discussion forum. So then you'll have until Friday to complete 3 peer reviews and then submit a self-assessment. You can submit your self-assessment when you submit it as well, but it might be nice to see what your peers say first and to have some distance from it so you can assess it a little more accurately.
So what is due tonight?
That is your draft of your PowerPoint. So it doesn't, where the audio is not required. Your script, so it's basically a workshop. So you're going to do a first draft of your workshop, or I'm sorry, a draft of your PowerPoint, which includes a script and a rough draft. So you do not need to embed the audio. You just need to write the script for tonight. Basically,
But the bolded part, it says it's due Monday 11/16. Is that next Monday, or are you talking about Wednesday?
oh, I see. Man, that's another, no, that's Wednesday. That's because I moved this back. That's wrong. Because we just looked at, the final is due on Wednesday, what we just saw. No wonder you're confused.
So do we do 3 peer reviews of the drafts, and those are due tonight? How do we access those?
This is just a discussion forum.
Oh, okay.
So you'll see there's probably some here already. Yes, there are. So they're already up there.
And then the one for Wednesday is different?
Yep, that's your final. So yeah, there's 2 things due this week. Excellent. So I wonder, in terms of, I also move the reading notes checkpoint until after break, which I already said, and that will be the last reading notes. No more reading notes of the semester. And we don't want to look at that yet either. So in the modules, in terms of your PowerPoint, I wonder how we feel about being able to do well on this PowerPoint. If we're like at a 5 out of 5, like I'm super set on my PowerPoint, I don't need any help at all, or like a 1 out of 5, like, oh my God, I'm freaking out, I have no idea what to do. Where are we on that scale? 3s, somewhere in between. If we're in the 2 or 3 area, I wonder where we, let's look at the final. I wonder where it seems like where it feels like we need most help. In looking at the persuasiveness of the argument, or in the presentation, the multimodality of the presentation.
Something that I'm struggling with is like looking at my PowerPoint. I feel like I've tried to do as little text as possible. So like none of my script is on my PowerPoint, and a lot of it is just like icons and pictures. I have like very few text elements, and I was just wondering like what your thoughts are on that.
Great. I would put the minimum that you need on there. So some anchor words. If there's a slide that you're looking at it and I'm like, I don't know what this is really saying. Like if I'm having to figure out what I'm looking at, that's going to be distracting to me. So even like 1 or 2 words or a list of the key ideas of what you're going to be saying. So you might look at your script and as an exercise be like, what are the most significant words that are going on here? And how can I import them onto the slide if you haven't done that already? So it's okay to have a slide with just like 2 or 3 words on it. It's okay to have some slides that have more text on them that kind of give an outline. I've also seen students like put their thesis up on a slide so that they could get more feedback on that particularly. So there's one slide that's like very text heavy. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. That helps.
And we're going to look at the example that I made. You're going to kind of see the format where I have a big title on every single one of my slides just so that the presentation looks the same. Like I just get a slide that I like the looks of, and then I just hit Control D 11 times. So I'm just duplicating the slide. So I have 12 of the exact same slide. And now I just go in and like tweak the text and change picture. Change text, change picture, change text, change picture, change text, change picture, change text, and now I'm done. That's what I did. Good. And then some slides actually might not have any, you might deliberately not have any text on a slide. The problem with that is if I'm watching your presentation and I don't know what I'm looking at, and I'm really now having to listen to you, all of a sudden my brain is working harder. And remember, none of us like to work hard in our brains. We all want it to just be easy. So you're trying to make it easy on your audience to get your point. Especially if you're talking about the historical context of biological evolution and what that means to researchers.
The other question I had about is if we use like, I've used a lot of, that's been really helpful for me is I've used a lot of like the Microsoft PowerPoint stock images.
Yes.
Citing those, we don't have to cite those. Okay.
Correct. That's just within the software.
Okay, cool.
You just
and then if we do use, like I have one image that's from a paper that I used, could I just include, like, how do I cite that image? Do you know what I'm saying?
You do.
I don't have to cite it in the PowerPoint, do I?
You do not. You're going to
Okay.
be able to submit a supplementary document that says like, hey, this is more information is on this document. So, and it does say, no, it doesn't say. So yeah, you can submit a document that goes over that. So earlier on, I think in the preview that we talked about that, if you want to submit a works cited page that's not on your presentation, or you want to submit other materials with your PowerPoint, you totally can.
What if all of our images are from Google Images?
You still basically need to say where you, like the site that you got that. So either the URL that you pulled the image from or the author that created the image.
Okay.
So you should be able to see, and you can easily hyperlink those, and you can just put that on a document or as your final slide of like image source credits, because you do want to give, especially like for your topic, since you're using historical images, right? And things that,
Yeah.
I would just say the websites that you got them from, or
just as like a link or like a whole MLA.
You could just put a image retrieved from and then put the link.
Thank you.
Great questions. Okay, good. Other questions? I think that gets to the or other questions about multimodality. And we're going to see an example of this in action here in just a few minutes.
I was going to say, with the whole hyperlink, can we do that just underneath in like a small text box on the PowerPoint as well?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I've definitely seen that work. You just don't, you obviously want it to be small because you don't want people to, you know, that's not the main point, is the link. Great, great. I really actually do want to take a step back to the main lessons of this course, and it's the persuasiveness of argument. So when I say that I'm going to be assessing whether or not your argument is persuasive, what does that mean? What makes an argument persuasive? At this point, week 13 of the semester, you should have a little bit more of a nuanced answer to that question than you did at the outset of the semester. And so I'm wondering, and this is one of the things, honestly, that you should be able to take with you beyond this course. So in your own language or in your notes, what makes an argument persuasive? When I say that, a persuasive argument, what kinds of things do you think about? There's a lot of right answers to this question, by the way.
I think it depends on the type of argument you're making. Like we talked about Rogerian or like Bitzer model. And so there are different aspects to those that make them persuasive.
I think the thing those all have in common is probably identifying your audience and making them identify with you and your argument.
You said making them, I'm going to say encouraging them, but maybe making them is better. And you said that really well, making them identify with you and your argument. So this is the sense of common ground, right? So if they can understand or identify with what you're saying, they're more likely to do that. Also, if you say something that alienates them, they're not gonna want that. And the kind of argument you're making, if it's Rogerian, for example, how is that different from a traditional argument? And how are you thinking about that, Gabby?
Well, it's more of like a conversation with them rather than like trying to convince them that you're right.
Good. Another answer to this question, what makes an argument persuasive?
We could always go back to like the Aristotle model.
Yep.
Or Plato. I don't know. Was it Aristotle?
It was Aristotle.
And that's like ethos, logos, pathos. So like how well you use those elements.
Good, and that's where my other class started. And just to review those, there's the sense logos is what's prioritized oftentimes in our education, which is our reasoning, evidence, statistics, left brain. Pathos is about more of the emotion, value, feeling. Interestingly, a lot of theorists put authority in here as well. So if I say, well, you know, Matthew McConaughey says, and he's my authority on something, I don't know why Matthew McConaughey would be an authority on very much, maybe acting and whiskey. But if Matthew McConaughey says, that appeals to us on an emotional level. So whenever I cite an authority, Joseph Gordon-Levitt claims there's an emotional pull there. Interestingly, I would kind of I always thought authority went in logos, but a lot of theorists put it down with pathos. Ethos is what I wanted to pull on when you give a presentation. We learned ethos as character and credibility. That's how I learned it in high school. That's how I learned it in college. That's what we teach in 150. I want to emphasize that we also in this class deepened this in the sense of a cover letter. Ethos is also about goodwill. So when I could ask you, well, what makes a good character? How do you gain credibility, especially in a field that you don't know? One, you care about things going well for everyone involved. I want this to work for you. I made this for you. I worked yesterday for you and for us. Good understanding is that you've done a lot to understand what the situation is. And then good sense is knowing when or not to, basically having good common sense. So if someone doesn't seem like they have good common sense, that lessens their credibility. I would add to this list curiosity, though that's probably just a value of me being a teacher. A good way to build ethos is to ask a question or to pose questions. Austin Kleon has a really great idea of basically all you're doing on a blog or a website is just posing a question and then inviting people to wonder with it. Basically inviting others to wonder about that question with you. I want to give you an example of this. Two things. And I'm going to exaggerate them a little bit, but this is presenter 1 and presenter 2, and see which one seems like more ethos that you would like. Presenter 1 says, in the course of this presentation, I'm going to tell you everything there is to know about evolutionary biology and how it connects to a historical understanding of where our understanding of evolution comes from. We're going to go over all the big points of evolution, and by the end of it, you're going to know a lot more about evolution. That's option 1. Option 2. This presentation begins with a question that I had about how to understand evolutionary biology. And I'm going to be honest with you, I am just starting this journey, and there is so much left we don't know about this. In fact, the more you get into evolutionary biology, the more questions we have. So I just want to ask this question about what evolutionary biology is and how we even began researching it, and share with you the little bit of information that I've gotten so far on this. See the difference between those two things? Which one seems like a more effective presentation?
Probably the second one, because it has an aspect of humility.
Yeah, and I feel like, how long have you been studying in your research topics? We got like 3 weeks, right? And most of you are doing topics that some people dedicate their entire lives to, right? So there's a sense it's okay to not know. Here's another one. We can shift to maybe, so I wanted to, no, not that one. Under a persuasive argument, it says, how well did you consider audience constraints and modify or qualify your argument accordingly? In your notes, I wanted to give you a sense of what this means. What does it mean to qualify an argument? Qualifying claims is when you add conditions to a claim. Sometimes this is if then. Sometimes it's going from all to some, or from definitely to maybe. This is often in response to an objection or counter argument. So I make an argument, you pose an objection, I then go, okay, that's true. So then let me modify my claim a little bit. Qualifying claims weakens the claim, but strengthens the argument, which is kind of weird, and I want to come back to that. Here's an example. I could say all college teachers are liberals. I could make that, and I could qualify that to say most college teachers are liberals, or I could super qualify it to say some college teachers might be liberals. This is a much weaker, some college teachers might be liberals, a much weaker statement than all college teachers are liberals. But which one of these is easier to prove?
In this instance, probably most college teachers.
Yeah, right. So it's probably actually that middle one is most accurate. We agree that this would be really impossible to prove, that all college teachers are liberals. All I need is one that's not a liberal to show that that's true, which might actually be hard to find depending on what department you're in. This is a weaker claim, but it's easier to prove, right? So does that make sense that if I weaken my claim, it makes it easier and I can strengthen my argument? My argument might not be like as hard hitting, but it's going to be more accurate. Here's another one. You should care, or you should eliminate single-use plastic. So my presentation I'm going to give today is about single-use plastic. And by the end of it, I'm going to convince you to stop using single-use plastic. Well, if someone tells me that, what's your reaction if I tell you don't use single-use plastic? Does anybody want to flip me off and be like, you don't know me? Don't tell me what to do. This is America. Maybe that's, okay, so how might I make that argument more palatable? Instead of telling someone what to do, I could say, if you care about the ocean, you should consider using less single-use plastic, if you can.
What I would argue in this scenario is more you should go from the route that there is chemicals, or there are chemicals in those plastic water bottles, so it appeals directly to the person you're talking to. You say that you are endangering your health by drinking out of plastic water bottles, because I don't want to say we don't care about the ocean, but it's just
good.
separated from us.
I love that. And so basically you could say, you know, I could say, you know, there's a lot of reasons why we shouldn't use single-use plastic, especially with things that we're drinking. I'm going to provide some of those to you. Some of them are the environment, but also what's really interesting is that plastic messes up our endocrine system and makes us less like, or whatever. So yeah, that's a great point. And then instead of saying don't use single-use plastic, you might say consider alternatives to single-use plastic. Again, I might adjust my claim. Instead of you should eliminate single-use plastic, an audience says, well, it's kind of hard. Sometimes I have to use single-use plastic. Like right now, they don't let you use recycled bags in Safeway or whatever. So then, okay, that's cool. So then maybe just like try to use less of it. So again, this is a sense of qualifying a claim. I'm adding conditions to a claim. So there's like, it's an added condition that's in a response to a position. This will strengthen your argument. It'll help you build ethos because it'll show that you're thinking about their constraints of time. And then, you know, Bronwyn's example is great because their constraint is you might not care about the ocean, or that might be kind of offensive to be like, hey, you should care about the ocean. But everybody cares about their own health. That's a clear constraint. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Please.
Sorry, I know we're running out of time, but about like the counter argument piece. So I understand that like obviously every argument is going to have an inevitable counter argument. But what if the counter argument is just like not plausible or not strong? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, what if the counter argument just like is kind of irrelevant?
Or like wouldn't hold up in a court of law, or is
Right.
based on not math or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Previously, before 4 years ago, I would say that, you know, you basically, that facts win, but everyone has their own facts now. No, I don't really know, honestly. I think you don't want to, I guess the other concern is you want to be careful about straw man, like you, which is a fallacy when you misrepresent another person's opinion. So if the counter argument is like wrong, so you're doing evolutionary biology, right? And a counter argument might be, well, we know evolution's wrong because God created the earth in 7 days. Maybe I don't want to wade into this one. But I think you could address that there are different ways of understanding. I would never say that that's wrong. It seems like a question to me of how we should read the Bible and how we should read science. So it brings up other I would approach it like it brings up other interesting questions to consider. The evolution creationism debate, for me, or for someone might say, you know, it's interesting. This is a real question of values and what we should care about. Maybe it's not important to care about evolution, but it is important to care about whether or not we're good people, which is an interesting and compelling argument. I'm not sure that evolutionary biology helps us live better lives. So instead of making it an argument about like who's right, it could be an argument about what we care about, which is oftentimes what these arguments are about. Does that make sense? So I would, maybe a better answer. You always want to try to find a way to make your counter argument as smart as possible. It's called the principle of charity. You want to help your counter arguers be as strong as possible. You're not trying to prove them wrong. You're trying to actually show under what conditions their argument might actually be right. Or if it's wrong, why that might, another way to think about it. Ideally, you're finding a counter argument or you're thinking about a perspective that really strengthens your perspective.
Do we need to have a counter argument in our presentation?
No, but you should kind of, you're going to need one in your final argument. So you do need to begin thinking about what a counter argument might look like.
Okay.
Another way to think about this is that you just need another perspective that's not your own. So it should be some, and your issue is interesting, Jenny, because you're looking at history from multiple perspectives already. But it should, I just want to see you engaging with multiple perspectives, basically, because that's what the state wants. And I think it's a good goal.
Okay.
Okay, we are running out of time. I did want to just show you 2 things that's here. One, under our modules page, we're going to go over this on Wednesday, but I think it's helpful. I did take some time to revise and update your final project requirements. So this is under module 15. This is due the Wednesday of week 15. And it shows basically the rubric for what your final paper will be assessed on, which is your rhetorical awareness, how you integrate, and the quality of the sources that you integrate, how you organize your work and revise your work for better organization, how you edit your work and write with better style, and then your self-assessment. So that's there. There's also, we're going to go over on Wednesday your final ePortfolio and what I'm looking for there. And I want you to see basically in brief that your reflection about the semester, instead of me giving you a final where I quiz you on what you learned, I'm going to let you tell me what you learned and use and assemble some artifacts that tell me what it is that you learned. So we're going to go over that next time. I wanted to go over, you can't hear my audio, so I'm just going to develop, and this is online if you want to hear what this is, but I'm going to go over what this presentation looks like as an example. And we'll wait. without further ado, we're going to start the presentation. Here it is from the beginning. This is on integrating ePortfolios into your composition courses, and this presentation covers the why, how, and what of ePortfolios. This is a picture of Simon Sinek's famous YouTube presentation, Start with Why, which is what we're going to do. So why ePortfolios? It's a high impact practice recognized by the state of Colorado. This connects with other high impact practices. It also connects with the learning outcomes for composition classes that are outlined in the syllabus. Further reasons why ePortfolios allow students an opportunity for authentic engagement, allows them to practice multimodality. It helps them be career ready and really gives them an opportunity to transfer what they learned in the classroom outside the classroom, which is one of our big goals. It also connects to rhetorical theory that we look at, particularly the idea of exigence, audience, and agency that students have, which connects to Bitzer and Vats, and also connection to an idea of multiple literacies where building ePortfolios helps them with functional and critical literacies. There are better or worse ways to do ePortfolios, and luckily there are best practices already identified. One, that you want to link it to learning outcomes. Two, you want to have students engage with their virtual identities. And three, students need to engage or think about authentic audiences, themselves and other people. Further, they should engage in some kind of digital environment. There should engage in reflection of what is working and what's not working, and it should encourage students to pursue more lifelong learning where they adapt or remix what they've learned in different scenarios. Another reason why and how to do this is it actually integrates well into a CO 300 curriculum in general. Students in my classes work on developing a writer identity, why they're in school, and what that means to them. Other assignments and the other assignments that work with that can all be artifacts that students can use in their portfolios. So what they do throughout the semester gives them basically the material to create a portfolio so they're not building it out of nothing. One of the big questions or concerns that instructors might have is how to grade or assess them. And for that, I actually kind of rely on students to self-evaluate their own work and make it a part of their self-assessment. There's also interesting work from Jesse Stommel on ungrading, on giving students the authority to really say what the quality of their work is. Another concern that teachers might have is how students can put that together. And the answer is actually there's really good, easy website builders, fair use images, and free design software and training if students really want that, but it doesn't need to be robust. There's an example on teachingeportfolios.weebly.com that provides a kind of portfolio that's super easy to create. This website didn't take me that much time at all, and students will have the same kind of a situation. Another question that might come up is why an electronic portfolio, and whether or not students can just create a real, like, actual physical portfolio like we traditionally think of portfolio. And the answer is that it actually doesn't need to be electronic. By electronic, we just mean capable of being shared electronically. So if a student has, oh, I'm out of time. I'm still talking in the actual presentation, but do you see kind of what I mean, that I actually just use the same slide? Now, reactions, comments, does any of this seem good or not so good by the way you watched it?
I think it was really helpful to see like the way that it progressed and like the way that you modeled it. And the way that you talked was like engaging. Like I almost found myself like not needing to read along the slides, which is not normal for me, but.
Right, it is kind of emphasizing the speech. It's also, some person said that it's almost a little boring, like it's just kind of the same thing over and over again, like in terms of visuals. And that's fine for me. Like I didn't need it to be flashy, and I didn't want it to be distracting. And it was to other teachers too, so. Okay, hopefully that makes and helps you feel more confident in your ability to do PowerPoint presentations. Any questions? Great. Actually, interesting, Jenny's point about constraints. Constraints are the hardest ones. I would just think about, for that, think about making it easy on the audience. and providing value to the audience. So your audience cares about making it easy. They want to save time. They also might have different beliefs. So you might not want to say anything that would be polarizing in that. So that's what I mean by constraints, is just thinking about it. Okay, what I do want to do, we are out of time, so there's no need for you to stick around. But since we do have 10 minutes, I want to share some examples of some powerful images just to look at them and see what you think of them. So when I share these, I want you to say what you think works about them or not. And if you have other questions, feel free to share.
I actually have a quick question about the presentation itself.
Great.
So what role do quotes play maybe in our slides? Like if we had a really powerful quote from like a research article, is that something we can include, or do we just want to pull the content from that?
Totally, you can include quotes.
Awesome.
I would if you want to make that point, for sure. This is from September 10th, 2018. And we're mainly looking at the visual elements and how they reinforce the meaning. Effective, not effective? Any comments?
I think the white background really makes it jut out.
Great. Space is why I pulled this one. This works because of the space, I feel like. It says, what is beauty for? Comments?
It's very abstract, which kind of goes back to our like comic discussion.
Yes. I actually find the text pretty distracting here. Like, I don't like this choice. I think it's, go ahead, Peter.
I'm sorry, it gave me a real headache trying to read it for a sec.
Yep. And it says how the extravagant splendor of the animal kingdom is prompting scientists to rethink evolution. It says wife and husband, girlfriend and husband, wife and boyfriend, not just us, by Susan Dominus. Is an open marriage a happier marriage? I chose this for its graphic design layout. Comments on what makes this work or not?
It's a lot of a lot of little details that kind of like when you're first looking at it, you don't really know what it's about or what it's for.
I think another thing that kind of impedes its like ability to be effective is that it just shows images of the couples, and that doesn't really translate if it's happy or not. It just kind of shows the relationships. I don't know if it's like sending any message.
Yeah, someone said yesterday is that they should have put the boyfriend in a different color shirt to make it like they should have just had a contrast more. Agreed.
I think this is not a very good image because I have no idea what it's communicating.
Yeah.
I think I do, but I think it has to do with the whole if the bees die, the world ends, and it's kind of harkening back to our nuclear holocaust sort of fears from the Cold War era, would be my guess if I had to.
Good guess. What will the decline of bugs mean for the rest of life on Earth?
Lots of color. Takes a second to realize what's going on there.
Yeah, and not lots of color, just one color family, actually. It's pretty much just red. Red, black, and white. Contrast, and the feel of this one contrasted with very different. This one's worth looking at. It gets in your head, Q said. If this girl wants it, then maybe the majority of girls want it. What teenagers are learning from online porn. Actually, one of the only articles from this stack that I actually read, which I think speaks to the effectiveness of this one. Comments on this one?
I like the use of the quote.
Yeah, this is actually an interesting example, Kyrie, to answer your question. The quote is actually really telling, especially with the title, What Teenagers Are Learning from Online Porn. Really kind of, those two work together really well. Other things, I like the fact that this, like, it seems artificial. Like they have like this, the image is all messed up. So it's like the visual representation that the image is jacked up kind of reflects the point that something is wrong when teenagers are learning about sex from porn. Solution of this article, the biggest place to help would be fathers talking to their sons, because this is mainly a problem with young adolescent males, because they're not as smart as females. I actually don't remember why they targeted males and not females, but that it was dads need to talk to their sons and they're not. So in the absence of those conversations, pornography is filling that gap. Another interesting visual, I think, it says fight for gender equality, the fight for gender equality on the right. And I think the other thing said behind one of the most dangerous and rapturous sports on earth by Daniel Duane, the women of big surfing. Comments on this one? I'm kind of mixed on this one.
I love the sideways words. I think that kind of distracts from the image, but it also makes you look at it longer. So I don't know.
Cowabunga.
What's that?
I said cowabunga.
Yeah. I mean, I like the photo. The photo is incredible. Like the way the wave looks in black and white, that is just so cool. But yeah, I actually kind of like the sideways text because it suggests that women are flipping it on its side a little bit, maybe. I'm not sure. I agree. I could go either way. This is the last one. Yeah. We can do, I have 2 more minutes. We'll do one more or a few more. This was another article that I read because it's environmental toxicity, which is something I'm interested in. First, the cattle got sick, then the people did too, but it would take years of fighting by one lawyer to hold DuPont accountable for exposing thousands of West Virginians to a chemical that scientists knew to be toxic. Gabby's squinting. Hard to read. Other comments?
Yeah, it's a lot of text for the opening.
Isn't that kind of interesting?
Mm-hmm.
With the picture?
I kind of like the text, but the color's bad. The color's really bad.
Yeah, it's gross. Which interestingly is what the article's about.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think it's supposed to be toxic looking. It's kind of a toxic green, right?
Yeah. And then it does say poisoned ground is the name of the article. This was also a really interesting peek into the world of lawyering and how you can make 300 grand a year if you work for DuPont, and you make 30 grand a year if you argue against DuPont. Fascinating shit. I loved that article. And it was disgusting and disturbing. I liked this one. I chose this one just for the graphic design of it and what it suggests. Is this the center of the global economy? China thinks it will be. Comments?
Are they saying it's like the railroad? I'm confused.
It's just in the middle of nowhere. It's about China, one of the, and I didn't read this one, but I think it's about where China is building a giant new plant and that it doesn't need to be connected to everything else. So I think if we were into global supply chain management or someone studying supply chain management, they would probably be able to say more about that. Secret History of Women in Coding. I don't really like this one as much, but I like the contrast in the image. There's some things with it that are good, but didn't engage me. And the last one, which might be my favorite. Mainly because the design suggests what it's about, right? Is Google too powerful, is the question.
There's also a thing that we used to do when we were kids. It's like Google do a barrel roll, I think, and all of the text like falls on the Google search page, and it looks kind of like that.
Does that still work?
I think so.
You can just say do a barrel roll?
You just type in Google do a barrel roll. I think that's the one. But you used to be able to make it do all sorts of things. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting argument against monopolies. And Google pretty much has a monopoly right now. Oh, whoop, there's two more. On power and sex in the workplace. I chose this one because it is like kind of, I'm not sure that I like the text over the other text, but this is a really good example of exigence. Your child's preschool teachers may be the most important educators she'll ever have, so why do they get paid the least? So again, a nice question to get people engaged, an image for Pathos, and the exigence is kind of, this is like, my exigence is that preschool teachers don't get paid enough. It's like, why don't preschool teachers get paid more? Okay, well, thanks for hanging out. I hope this was helpful in thinking about the way we communicate visually or not. And any questions, comments, concerns? Signing off.
Thank you.
All right. See ya.
See ya.
See ya. Bye, Bronwyn.
Do you have a minute?
Yeah, I do. I have 12.
Okay. I'm not sure where to take my PowerPoint.
Yeah, you have a lot of interesting information.
Yeah. I know that I want to take things in the direction of a CSU somehow related, but it's really hard to find information about.
I also think it's hard when I'm thinking about this, it's hard to make an argument about it. Like I'm thinking about what, and maybe, so we could just think out loud about here. Let me stop the recording.